You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans. Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk, and I have to start with Dolphins Raiders. The NFL played 3 games on Saturday. This was by far and away the best one. In the final 4 minutes and 5 seconds of this game, there were 22 total points scored. To put that in perspective, there were 51 total points scored in the whole game. The Dolphins beat the Raiders 26-25. The Dolphins are in the driver's seat in their quest to make the playoffs, whereas the Raiders are dead in the water. There are a lot of things to get to when it comes to this game, but I want to start with Brian Flores' decision to bench Tua for Ryan Fitzpatrick. Something that he's done before. He did it against the Broncos on November 22nd. And he did it on Saturday. Look, I understand that Flores is in a tough spot. He's trying to serve 2 masters. He's trying to make the playoffs while developing a young quarterback. Putting those 2 things together isn't good. Rookie quarterbacks are going to make mistakes. They are going to make bad decisions. They're not going to get rid of the ball as quickly as you'd like them to. They may get locked on to a certain receiver. Mike Francesa says this all the time. The best thing that rookie quarterbacks do is become second-year quarterbacks. So obviously, when you're making a playoff push, you don't want to have a quarterback that you have to worry about. But having said that, this idea that every time Tua really struggles, you're going to bring in Ryan Fitzpatrick is ridiculous to me. The message that sends is that we're not going to let you work through your mistakes. You need to be perfect. I gotta tell you, I give Tua a ton of credit for being as mentally strong as he is. He's not letting this get to him. He's saying all the right things. After he was benched in the Broncos game, he missed the game after. That was against the Jets. He was hurt. And then he came back against the Bengals and beat them 19-7. They played the Chiefs tough. They beat the Patriots. And then the Raiders game. The guy's not allowed a bad game? I mean, my God. Let me tell you, Patrick Mahomes has had some bad games recently. Is he going to be benched? Let's say the Dolphins make the playoffs. What's going to happen if Tua struggles? You're going to bench him? You're not going to let him get that invaluable playoff experience? I understand that the allure of making a big playoff run is incredible. To quote the Maltese Falcon, it's the thing that dreams are made of. I may have butchered that quote a little bit, but the gist is right. But you drafted a quarterback with the 5th overall pick. If you really care about wins and losses, why did you put him in the first place? Fitzpatrick was rolling when you benched him. What that signaled was, we're going to ride or die with Tua. Whatever happens, happens. This stuff about bringing a relief pitcher in out of the bullpen, it's ridiculous. It doesn't work in football. Yeah, Russell Wilson. You had a bad game against the Giants about a month ago. We're benching you for Geno Smith. Let me tell you, Brian Flores is lucky that he has a quarterback as mentally strong as Tua. He's not letting this get to him. Again, the guy's saying all the right things. I commend him for it. There are a lot of young quarterbacks in this league who, if they were benched like this, it would shake their confidence to the core. I like Brian Flores. What Flores has done with the Dolphins is nothing short of incredible. The guy's probably going to get my NFL Coach of the Year vote when I go through all the awards a week from tomorrow. Yeah, that's right, I'm doing that. But this stuff with Tua, I just don't get it. What's the end game? I understand what the end game is for this year. But what's going to happen when Fitzpatrick hits free agency? Let's say Fitzpatrick goes somewhere else. There's a real chance he could go to the Jets. Or maybe he retires. When you bring in the new backup quarterback, are you going to do this with Tua again? The reality is he's going to have at least one bad game. You need to let him work through it. That's how quarterbacks develop. If it wasn't for Tua being so mentally strong, the Dolphins would have a real issue on their hands. I understand that they got the win on Saturday. The decision worked. Fitzpatrick did look better than Tua. There's no question. But in reality, when you have that young quarterback, let it ride. There's no guarantee that Tua wouldn't have been able to lead a Dolphins comeback. And it's not like they were down a lot. When Fitzpatrick came in, the Dolphins were down by 3. It was the first score in the fourth quarter. That's when Fitzpatrick came in. The one thing I'll say is, Tua getting benched was apropos for this game. The Dolphins go on a 13-play drive that starts at their own 12. It stalls out at the Raiders' 4-yard line. They kick a field goal to tie the game. Then Derek Carr extends the play. Nelson Agholor does a great job catching the ball over Byron Jones. Great job by Carr on the deep ball. Great job by Agholor. Touchdown Raiders. They take the lead. Then Myles Gaskin catches a short pass and breaks it for a touchdown. Fantastic job by him. Gaskin had a fantastic game on Saturday. 14 carries for 87 yards, that's over 6 yards a carry, and 5 catches for 82 yards and 2 touchdowns. After that, it's 23-22 Dolphins, with under 3 minutes to go in regulation. After that, the Raiders take over. The biggest play of that drive was the Byron Jones pass interference. I mean, was it pass interference? The answer is yes. I've seen more egregious pass interferences not called. He really didn't turn Agholor around. I'd have been okay with a no call, but I understand the pass interference. And Nelson Agholor had another huge game for the Raiders. 5 catches for 155 yards and a touchdown. He's going to get a big payday soon. He's a free agent after this year. Then with under 2 minutes left, the Dolphins have no timeouts. Josh Jacobs has every opportunity to punch the ball into the end zone. Instead, he slides down at the 1-yard line to take some more time off the clock. Derek Carr then takes a knee. It's 4th and goal with 23 seconds left. Daniel Carlson makes a 22-yard field goal to give the Raiders a 25-23 lead. The big question: should Jacobs have scored? He had every opportunity to score. It's not like he was fighting for every inch. The Dolphins were going to let him score. He made the conscious decision to run out the clock. That's what John Gruden wanted. I'm not begrudging Jacobs. I gotta be honest with you. I don't have a problem with what the Raiders did. If Jacobs scores on 2nd down, there's over 100 seconds left for the Dolphins to do something crazy. That's a lot of time. Take as much time off the clock as you can. I understand making them score a touchdown to win. It's easier for you to win that way than it is to stop them from getting into field goal range. I get all that. But with 23 seconds left, actually it was 19 seconds, because 4 seconds ticked off the clock for the field goal try, you've got to trust your defense to not let them get the ball into field goal range. It's just that simple. Even though the Raiders have been bad defensively all year, they weren't bad on Saturday. Give Rod Marinelli some credit. He's been better than Paul Gunther. Then the play of the game. With Arden Key grabbing Fitzpatrick's face mask and turning it around basically 180 degrees, I don't know how Fitzpatrick's neck didn't snap, Fitzpatrick completes a bomb to Mac Hollins. It was an incredible throw. It was an incredible catch. That set up the eventual game-winning field goal by Jason Sanders. This is a theme for John Gruden. This year and last year, the Raiders have been in prime position to make the playoffs, and they folded. The Raiders started this year 6-3. Now they're 7-8. Last year, they were 6-4. They finished 7-9. That's a bad look for John Gruden. This is a guy who should be able to finish the job and get his team in the playoffs. Now, I really like John Gruden. What happened on Saturday wasn't John Gruden's fault. It was Arden Key's fault. Those extra 15 yards were key. Now, the Raiders were in a bad defense. There was a hole that Mac Hollins found that resulted in him being as wide open as he was. Some people got on Damon Arnett for leaving Hollins that open. That's what happens in cover 2. Don't call cover 2. Call a standard prevent defense. You see it in Madden. I don't understand why these coaches can't coach late games defensively. Greg Williams, Rod Marinelli, come on, it's not that hard. All you have to do is drop a bunch of players back. Give them the underneath stuff. Don't let them get out of bounds. Let the clock run. Don't let these quarterbacks throw deep passes. I like Gruden. I like Gruden a lot. But the reality is, this is back-to-back seasons that the Raiders have folded like a cheap suit. That's a bad look for him. Is it more on Arden Key than it is John Gruden? For this game, yes. For the totality of the season, no. The reality is, the one win that they got this year was because Greg Williams called that ridiculous all-out blitz. They're 7-8. They should be 6-9. Gruden needs to get this figured out quickly. I don't begrudge his decision to play for the field goal and not the touchdown. But he can't let his team fold for a third straight year. That's just not going to work. Next year, the Raiders have to get in the playoffs. They've shown that they can knock on the door. Now they need to actually go through that door. It's just that simple. I'm not saying you need to go on a crazy run, but make the playoffs. Moving on now to the battle for the NFC least. And a lot happened yesterday with the 4 teams in that division. Washington lost, the Giants lost, and the Cowboys beat the Eagles. The Cowboys have won 3 straight. Can we take a moment to appreciate how crazy that is? The Cowboys were dead in the water. Now they're 6-9. They've won 3 straight. There's a real chance that they'll be hosting a playoff game in a week. It comes down to this. Since the Cowboys beat the Eagles were eliminated from playoff contention. Some big decisions need to be made by Jeffrey Lurie. What are you going to do with Howie Roseman? What are you going to do with Doug Peterson? How are you going to move on from Carson Wentz? Because Jalen Hurts is going to be their starter next year. Are you going to keep Wentz around? You may have no choice. Some tough decisions to make in Philly soon. The reality is I can make a case for all 4 scenarios. Getting rid of Roseman and Peterson, keeping them both, keeping Roseman and firing Peterson, or keeping Peterson and firing Roseman. I don't envy Jeffrey Lurie. That's an incredibly hard decision. So with the Eagles out of it, it comes down to this. If Washington beats them on Sunday, they're the Sunday night game. If Washington wins, they're in. Alright, it's the classic win and you're in scenario. You control your own destiny. The Cowboys are facing the Giants. If Washington loses, whoever wins the Cowboys-Giants game will win the NFC least. And I think that shapes up really well for the Dallas Cowboys. As crazy as this sounds, considering where we were a month ago, I think the Dallas Cowboys are going to win the NFC East. It comes down to this. Who do you trust more? Andy Dalton? Alex Smith? Or Daniel Jones? Smith, we have no idea how he's going to come back from the injury. It's hard for me to confidently say that Washington's going to win on Sunday night. I have no idea how Smith is going to play against an Eagles team that would love, and I mean love, to play spoiler. And let me say this about Washington. I like Dwayne Haskins. There's a part of me that thinks if you put him in a situation where he doesn't need to start, you let him develop for a year or two, he can turn into what we all thought he'd turn into coming out of OSU. This is a guy who I thought was the best quarterback in the 2019 draft. That was just 2 years ago. I can't give up on him, but he's making it really hard. The partying without a face mask, not wanting to face reporters, the guy gets stripped of his captaincy. Ron Rivera said that Taylor Heinicke will start if Alex Smith can't go. So Dwayne Haskins, the 15th overall pick, just 2 years ago, is being benched for Taylor Heinicke, a guy who has only started one game in his NFL career. In a do-or-die scenario, Ron Rivera is choosing Heinicke over Haskins. You know what? It's the right decision. There's no possible way that Dwayne Haskins should start this game. Haskins had every opportunity to reclaim the starting quarterback job in Washington. This guy comes in to relieve Alex Smith after Smith leaves with an injury against the Niners. Washington ekes out a win, no thanks to Haskins. The next week, they lose to the Seahawks. Haskins wasn't dreadful, but he wasn't great. Threw 2 interceptions, fumbled the ball once. The reality is the Seahawks were beatable a couple weeks ago. A better quarterback beats them. Haskins didn't. And yesterday, forget about it. Haskins was dreadful. Completed just 50% of his passes. Threw 2 interceptions. Lost a fumble. He's done in Washington. And I mean that literally because he was just released by Washington. Washington just pulled the plug on a quarterback that they drafted in the first round in 2019. You can't hate the decision. Haskins had every chance in the world and he blew it. Ryan Leaf said that what Haskins is doing reminds him of what he did. It doesn't get much worse than that. Is Dwayne Haskins' NFL career over? No. Someone will take a chance on him. He'll have to earn his spot in training camp and the preseason, but someone will bring him in. I thought Dwayne Haskins was the best quarterback in the 2019 NFL draft. If I was running a team, sure, I'll bring him in. Let him compete with someone for the third-string quarterback job. Then maybe he can move up to backup, and then who knows? It's the right decision by Washington to cut him. It's better for all parties. I'll say this, a lot of people are praising the Giants for this. They're saying that because Haskins was cut, it makes the decision to draft Daniel Jones look better. What? The decision, if you put yourself in Dave Gettleman's shoes, when he was on the clock with the 6th overall pick, wasn't Jones or Haskins. There were other players there. Josh Allen, Ed Oliver, Jonah Williams, Rashawn Gary, Brian Burns. Has Daniel Jones had the better career than Dwayne Haskins? Yes. But you know what? Sam Darnold has had a better NFL career than Dwayne Haskins. That doesn't make Sam Darnold a great quarterback. The idea that this betters the Jones pick, it's nonsense. Okay, Jones is better than Haskins as of right now. But in 20 years that can change, and that still doesn't make that pick right. The right decision would have been to take Josh Allen and roll with Eli for another year. That is ridiculous. As for the Giants now, they were the darlings of the NFL after they beat the Seahawks. They were 5-7 after that win. They controlled their destiny. All they had to do was win, and they'd win the NFC least. Instead, they've lost 3 straight. They lost to the Cardinals 26-7, they lost to the Browns 20-6, and they lost to the Ravens 27-13. The Giants are prone to collapsing. This looks like another big Giants collapse. I mean, it's clear as day that Daniel Jones isn't the long-term starter, even if the Giants sneak into the playoffs. There's no possible way that Daniel Jones should be the Giants starter. The Giants need to look for a new quarterback. It's just that simple. How can you look at Daniel Jones, a quarterback who has only thrown 9 touchdowns to 9 interceptions, has only rushed for 1 touchdown, and has fumbled the ball 10 times, giving up 5 of them, and say, this is my franchise quarterback? The Giants need to move on from Daniel Jones. Do they need to move on from the guy who drafted him, Dave Gettleman? See, here's the thing. If if Gettleman stays, Jones is probably staying. But if Gettleman goes, Joe Judge is going. You've got to give the new GM the authority to get rid of Joe Judge if he wants to. Or else you're in a bad Rex Ryan, John Idzik situation. Trust me, that's not going to end well. And you know what? If Joe Judge was as good as everyone said he was after the Seahawks win, the Giants wouldn't have collapsed like this. All this stuff about Judge establishing culture. He's holding players accountable. It's very similar to the stuff I was saying about Adam Gase last year. I mean, you can make the argument that the Giants would be better off just blowing things up. Is Daniel Jones going to win a big game for you? No, he's not. Is Joe Judge going to win a Super Bowl? Come on. That's ridiculous. Can't believe I let people talk me into saying that Joe Judge was actually a solid coach. Should have stuck to my guns. That's a bad job by me. And Dave Gettleman has made some disastrous decisions as Giants GM. He hit free agency out of the park. James Bradbury and Blake Martinez have had great seasons. But taking Jones, failing to really fix the offensive line, it looked solid earlier in the year, and now forget about it. You can make the argument, the Leonard Williams trade, failing to find another good cornerback to play next to Bradbury, DeAndre Baker failed, Sam Beal failed, Darnay Holmes really isn't that great. The best thing might be to blow it up. Find a new GM, find a new coach, and find a new quarterback. You have some solid pieces there. Barkley, Shepard, Slayton, Martinez, Bradbury, Ryan, who you just signed to a 3-year deal worth about $30 million. That was a good move. Now you see why I wanted Logan Ryan on the Jets. You've got some solid pieces there. You just need to fix the big ones. 3 of the biggest positions in the NFL. GM, head coach, quarterback. The Giants could stand to fix all 3. It's just that simple. All of that, Washington having a big question mark at quarterback, and the Giants choking, opens the door for the Dallas Cowboys. They've won 3 straight, very convincingly. In all 3 of their wins, they've scored at least 30 points. Andy Dalton looks like the Dalton of old. Ezekiel Elliott had a really good game yesterday. 19 carries for 105 yards. Amari Cooper had a really good game. 4 catches for 121 yards. CeeDee Lamb had 2 touchdowns. 1 on the ground, 1 through the air. Michael Gallup caught 2 touchdowns. He had 6 catches for 121 yards. The Cowboys' offense is coming together at the right time. Is their defense still vulnerable? Yes. They gave up 33 points to the Nick Mullins and C.J. Beathard-led San Francisco 49ers. That's not that good. And Jalen Hurts threw for over 300 yards yesterday. But I will say this, the Cowboys forced 3 turnovers yesterday. They limited Miles Sanders, he had under 4 yards a carry. This all seems to be shaping up pretty darn well for the Dallas Cowboys. If Mike McCarthy can somehow lead this team into the playoffs by winning the NFC least? The Cowboys get in at 7-9, so it's not as bad as it could have been for the NFL if they had a 6-10 winner. It's still possible. If the Giants get in, they're getting in at 6-10. You can't have that. 7-9, it's not great, but we've had it before. You can live with it. And B, all the heat that was getting thrown his way, give him credit for leading the team into the playoffs. Are they a Super Bowl threat when they get there? Absolutely not. The team that they'd face in the first round would be the 5 seed in the NFC. As of right now, that's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Buccaneers would destroy the Cowboys. But give McCarthy credit for weathering the criticism and getting this team into the playoffs. Assuming the Cowboys win on Sunday and Washington loses. Let Kellen Moore go back to Boise State as their head coach. That'd make perfect sense. If they could get Kellen Moore as their next head coach, oh my God. That would be incredible. The final NFL game that I want to talk about is Colts Steelers. And this was a huge win for the Steelers. With just over 5 minutes left to go in the third quarter, they were down 24-7. They had first and goal at the Colts 1 and couldn't punch it in. What did I say last week about the Steelers? They really needed to win one of these games to right the ship. A lot of people were killing them. This was an overrated Steelers team. They had lost 3 straight. Remember, if the Browns had beaten the Jets and the Colts had beaten the Steelers on Sunday, the AFC North would have been up for grabs. Whoever won Steelers-Browns was going to win the division. But the Steelers didn't want to let it get to that point. They scored 21 unanswered points. Give Ben Roethlisberger credit. He put the team on his back. The Steelers only ran the ball realistically 12 times. Roethlisberger had 2 carries, so it's technically 14, but those weren't designed runs. Roethlisberger threw the ball 49 times. He completed 34 passes for 342 yards and 3 touchdowns. He torched this pretty darn good Colts defense. I mean, it's a bad look that the Colts couldn't put away the Steelers offensively, but defensively they folded like a cheap suit. That is a bad look because the Colts' calling card this year has been defense. If the Colts had won yesterday, they're 11-4. They're in the playoffs. Now, they're 10-5, and they're out of the playoffs. The dichotomy is amazing. Huge win for the Steelers. Huge loss for the Colts. I mean, you can go back to some of the shows. I thought the Steelers were being underrated. I did think they were a good team. Was it touch and go when they had lost 3 straight? Absolutely. But even when they were undefeated, I thought they were being underrated. A lot of people were minimizing the wins. I thought that was unfair. And the Colts, I always thought, were a little overrated. Watching them play, they just didn't scare me. Sunday is going to be huge for the Colts. They need some help. They need to win, and they need the Dolphins, Ravens, and/or Browns to lose. The Dolphins are going to play the Bills. The Ravens are going to play the Bengals. The Browns are going to play the Steelers. And the Colts are going to play the Jaguars. It's still possible for the Colts to make the playoffs. But they made things a lot harder on themselves by not putting their foot on the throat of the Steelers. In breaking NFL news, next year will be the start of a 17-game season. We are moving from 17 weeks to 18 weeks. Each team is going to play 17 games. Obviously, I love it. The more football, the better. But it's interesting the chain reaction that this caused. You're going to get more revenue, so that's going to offset some of the losses that teams and players are going to have because of this year's coronavirus issues. Also, the NFL is going to get rid of a preseason game or two. We don't know yet whether it's one or two, but it will be one or two. There won't be an extra bye week, but what this does do is it moves the Super Bowl to the second week of February. So in some years, the NFL will get what it's wanted for a long time. For the Super Bowl to occur the eve of President's Day. They've wanted that for a long time, so that way people would be more amenable to staying up later. They could take the next day off. They've wanted that for a long time. In some years, they're going to get that. As for how the extra game will be determined, it will be an AFC versus NFC game, pitting teams against each other in accordance with their divisional finish. The hosts of that game will alternate. The more football, the better, I say. I understand it's harder on the players. They've been opposed to it. I get that. I'm not saying their concerns are wrong, but as a fan, I support this. As a player, I understand not supporting it. One more game equals one more week away from your family, one more week that you can get a career-ending injury. I get that. But again, as a fan, you have to love this. Alright, now I'll give you some MLB Valk talk. And late last night, the Padres and Rays pulled off the stunner of all stunners. By far and away the biggest move of the offseason so far, and that probably will be. When Real Muto signs, it won't be as big as this. Same thing with Springer, same thing with Bauer, same thing with LeMahieu. There's no way that anything else will happen that equals the magnitude of the Rays trading Blake Snell to the Padres for Luis Patino, Francisco Mejia, Blake Hunt, and Cole Wilcox. Before I get into the Padres' end of things, and how scary they are now, I need to talk about the embarrassment to baseball that is the Tampa Bay Rays. Stu Sternberg should be absolutely ashamed of himself. Every MLB owner should hate this. This is an affront to what baseball is. Baseball is the only sport that doesn't have a salary cap. The luxury tax is not a salary cap. Teams blow by that all the time. It's a sport where you're able to spend hand over fist and get the highest priced players you possibly can. Just look at the Yankees and Dodgers. You want to tell me that that's not the right way to build a team? Fine. But the point is, there's no good reason to not spend money if you are an MLB owner. And Stu Sternberg, the cheapest owner in all of sports, just gave away one of the best pitchers in baseball. If this doesn't infuriate you as a baseball fan, what is wrong with you? Hey, I'm a Yankees fan. He's out of my division. Let the Dodgers suffer. Let the Rockies suffer. Let the Diamondbacks suffer. And let the Giants suffer. I don't have to deal with them anymore. I'm happy. But as a baseball fan, this sickens me. It was bad enough that you screwed him over in Game 6 of the World Series by pulling him too early. It was bad enough that you let Charlie Morton go to the Braves. Now, the Tampa Bay Rays have literally given away one of their best players, if not their best player. A guy who in 2018 won the Cy Young Award. He led the majors in wins with 21. He had a 1.89 ERA. It led the American League. There's no excuse to trade him. I don't care. If these players, Patino, Mejia, Hunt, and Wilcox, turn into the second comings of Cy Young, Ivan Rodriguez, Johnny Bench, and Nolan Ryan, it's irrelevant. There is no good reason to get rid of Blake Snell. Let me tell you, it's better for the Rays if those guys fail, because it will stop them from making these cheap decisions. That is what Stu Sternberg is. He is cheap. That is the worst possible thing that you can be as an owner. I would rather have an owner that meddles than an owner who doesn't spend money. An owner that meddles is at least trying. There's no way that Stu Sternberg is trying. Stu Sternberg doesn't want the Rays to make the playoffs. He doesn't care. The Tampa Bay Rays are not a playoff team. They're not going to make the playoffs without Snell and Morton. The New York Yankees were just gifted the division. Thank you. Stu Sternberg, thank you. Seriously, as a Yankees fan. This may be the best move that the Yankees make all offseason. Doesn't matter if they bring back LeMahieu or not. Getting Snell out of the division is more impactful. The reality is, the most maligned owners in Major League Baseball, before they sold the team to Steve Cohen, were Fred and Jeff Wilpon. Let me tell you, they're a million times better than Stu Sternberg. The Wilpons at least spent money. The Wilpons never traded their star pitcher. They didn't trade Matt Harvey when he was the Dark Knight. They didn't trade Jacob deGrom. They didn't trade Noah Syndergaard. They didn't trade Zach Wheeler. The best thing for the Tampa Bay Rays would be if the Wilpons took some of the money that they got from Steve Cohen and gave it to Stu Sternberg. This is indefensible. I gotta tell you, I feel bad for my best friend, Mark. He called me yesterday to talk about this trade. I texted him. I don't remember exactly what I texted him, but I texted him something. He called me. I was more upset than he was. He said, Jacob, I'm used to it. I've seen my team do this before. Do you have any idea how sad that is to hear? You get used to your team giving away their star players. Yes, the Rays do it a lot. There's no question. But that doesn't make it right. The reality is, if Patino, Mejia, Hunt, and Wilcox work out, they're going to be traded soon. Tyler Glasnow is going to be traded soon. Austin Meadows is going to be traded soon. Nick Anderson is going to be traded soon. I mean, my God. What's the point in getting these young guns if you're just going to trade them? That makes no sense. And let's be clear about one thing. Blake Snell was not making a lot of money. Blake Snell had 3 years left on his contract. In those 3 years, he is set to make $40.8 million. Not annually. In summation. Let me ask you this. If Blake Snell was to hit the open market, do you think he'd get more than that? Do you think he'd get a 3-year deal worth $40.8 million? Or do you think he'd get a mammoth Garrett Cole-like deal? That's the kind of talent we're dealing with in Blake Snell. This is equivalent to the Yankees somehow trading Garrett Cole. Or the Braves trading Max Fried. Or the Indians trading Shane Bieber. Actually, no, it's worse than that, because the Rays won the pennant. What's the point? If the pennant is irrelevant, then just keel over and die. Let Mike Brasso strike out against Chapman. Blow the 3-0 against the Astros. Think about this. Blake Snell, one of the most dominant players that the Tampa Bay Rays have ever had. Just as good as David Price was for him. Better than James Shields. Better than Matt Garza. Better than Scott Kazmir. Better than Chris Archer. Better than all of them. The last moment that you saw him in a Rays uniform was him getting pulled too early in Game 6 of the 2020 World Series. It's so apropos. It's so fitting. A terrible decision to pull him by a terrible organization. Stu Sternberg, you are an embarrassment to Major League Baseball. You are an embarrassment to sports. The best thing that you could do would be to sell the team. I don't care who you sell them to. Someone who wants to move the team to Montreal, Nashville, Las Vegas, my backyard. I don't care. Sell the team. Alright, let me get to the players that the Padres traded. They did give up a lot here. It's worth it, but they gave up some solid players. Luis Patino is one of the best prospects in all of baseball. He would have been the Padres' best prospect if not for the fact that they have Mackenzie Gore, which is another great job by the Padres in not having to include Gore in this trade. C.J. Abrams, Luis Campusano, good job by the Padres there. But they did give up a great prospect in Patino. A consensus top 30 prospect in the majors. Last year he struggled. Went 1-0 with a 5.19 ERA. He pitched mainly out of the bullpen. But I wouldn't worry about any of that. He has the makings of a frontline starter. The guy has a great fastball. It can hit 100 miles an hour. Really good slider with great late movement. He gets players to look foolish on that pitch. Good curveball, solid changeup, good control. Luis Patino is going to be a really, really, really good player in the majors for a long time. He's just not Blake Snell. In 2019, Francisco Mejia had a really good year. He had 265 with 8 homers and 22 RBIs. But last year, he was dreadful. He hit just .077 with 1 homer and 2 RBIs. Can he bounce back? The answer is yes. The Rays need a catcher. Mike Zunino is a great defender, but not much with the bat. I don't care if you hit for power. You've got to hit more than 200. That's his career average. Mejia can bounce back and have a really good year, but the Rays' catching situation still isn't great. Blake Hunt is a really good contact hitter. He's the prototypical put the bat on the ball hitter. Always puts together good at-bats, doesn't chase, and his future is at catcher. He's a great defensive catcher. Really good arm, can fire to second very quickly, has a good pop time, can frame pitches well, can block balls in the dirt. Blake Hunt profiles as a really good starting catcher in the majors. And Cole Wilcox, I'll be honest with you, I don't know too much about him. I know that he was taken in the 3rd round in this past MLB draft. There were some reports that said he could go in the 1st round if his signing bonus demand wasn't so high. Look, I have no reason to believe that Cole Wilcox isn't a really good starting pitching prospect. I just don't know too much about him. Now for the obvious statement of the year, and I can say that because the year is almost over, the Padres won this trade. My buddy Mark asked me if this puts the Padres ahead of the Dodgers. And the answer is no, it doesn't. But look, once you get into October, anything can happen. Maybe the Dodgers get bitten by the injury bug. Clayton Kershaw isn't the best postseason pitcher, and neither is David Price. A million things can happen. Let me just tell you some of the big guns that the Padres have. Hosmer, Cronenworth, Tatis, Machado, Grisham, Myers, Profar, Snell, Clevenger, Davies, Lamet, Pomeranz, Rosenthal, Pierce Johnson. And that's not even mentioning guys like Gore and Morejon. Fantastic young guns in their own right. The Padres are going all in here. There is no question that this trade makes them exponentially better than they were 24 hours ago. Are they World Series favorites? Probably not, but they're in the conversation. The Padres will be playing October baseball, whereas the Rays will be lucky to finish in third place in the AL East, and there is no chance they make the playoffs. Great job by the Padres, and shame on the Rays. There was another baseball trade that I really want to talk about, and that is the Pirates trading Josh Bell to the Nationals for Will Crowe and Eddie Yean. Bell was rumored to be on the trading block. There were reports that said the Yankees had conversations with the Pirates about him. I never thought they made much sense, but we knew he was available. He had a down year. The Pirates are bad. This isn't as bad as the Rays trading Snell. But there's no question that Bell has the ability to bounce back. In 2019, he was an all-star. He had .277 with 37 homers and 116 RBIs. Last year, like I said, down year. He had .226 with 8 homers and 22 RBIs. But there's no question in my mind that he can bounce back. It's very easy for me to write off last season as an aberration. And the Nationals had a big hole at first base. Eric Thames was absolutely dreadful. He hit just .203 with 3 homers and 12 RBIs. Even if you want to forget about what happened last year, Thames is best suited as a backup. You don't want him starting every day. Bell goes a long way towards shoring up the Nationals lineup. They really don't have too many holes. It wouldn't surprise me at all if they made it back to the playoffs. As for the players the Nationals gave up, Crowe profiled as a solid 3 to 4 starter, probably closer to 4. He throws 4 pitches, fastball, slider, curveball, changeup. All pretty well. Nothing great, nothing terrible. His control is the same. In 3 games last year, he was really bad. He was 0-2 with an 11.88 ERA. I'm not in love with Crowe's upside, but I do think he can be a solid innings eater. He just won't be an ace. And Yean is a guy who I really like watching pitch. The prototypical pitcher's frame. 6'1", 180 pounds. No wasted movement. Really, really good slider. Solid changeup. let me tell you, even though Yin is still waiting to play outside of instructional leagues, I feel confident saying that Yin could have the much better career than Crow. Yin does have the ability to be an ace potentially. Crow doesn't. I don't mind this trade for the Pirates. It makes sense for them. They got a solid haul, 2 solid starting pitching prospects, but I'm going to give a 60-40 edge to the Nationals because Bell does make that lineup a lot scarier. That was a big hole that the Nationals had, and now it's been closed as well as you could expect it to be. Alright, it's time to talk about the 2 absolutely tragic deaths that happened over the weekend. I'll go chronologically in order of their death. So that means I'm going to start with Casey Jones and end with Phil Niekro. When you think of those old Celtics teams of the 50s and 60s, you think of Russell, you think of Cousy, you think of Havlicek, and you think of Auerbach. Casey Jones, along with a whole host of other excellent players, Tom Heinsohn, Sam Jones, Frank Ramsey, Jim Luskatorf, the list goes on, were just as important to the Celtics dynasty. Jones played an integral role for the Celtics. He was great defensively. The Celtics have had some great defensive guards: Avery Bradley, Dennis Johnson, Rajon Rondo. It starts with Casey Jones. Jones played college ball at San Francisco with Bill Russell. The 2 of them won back-to-back NCAA titles in 1955 and 1956. He also represented his country in the 1956 Olympics in Melbourne, Australia, where we won the gold medal in basketball. In 56, he was drafted by the Celtics. And I've spoken about the 56 draft before for the Celtics. Tom Heinsohn, Bill Russell, and Casey Jones. You can't do much better than that. Jones played 9 seasons in the NBA. He won an NBA title every year except his last one. In 66-67, the Celtics lost in the Eastern Division Finals to Wilt Chamberlain's 76ers in 5 games. Again, I'll go back to something that I said earlier. The role players were just as important as the stars. Casey Jones did a lot for the Celtics. He was Bob Cousy's backup. So while Cousy and Russell were getting the headlines, Jones was doing all the little things. Playing great defense, setting up his teammates. There is no question that the role players for those Celtics were just as important as the stars. After Jones retired, he got into coaching. And similarly to his playing career, every year he was a coach, he made the playoffs except his last one. He coached 10 years. He made the playoffs in 9 of them. He started with the then Capital Bullets, with guys like Wes Unseld and Elvin Hayes, but they lost in the conference semifinals. The year after that, they became the Washington Bullets and made the NBA Finals. Phil Chenier played a big role for the Bullets that year. Unfortunately for them, they were swept in the NBA Finals by the Golden State Warriors. The year after that, the Bullets lost in the conference semifinals, and Jones was let go. He resurfaced as Celtics head coach in the 83-84 season, replacing the very popular Bill Fitch. Larry Bird loved Bill Fitch. They had won an NBA title together in 1981. They had made the playoffs every year. They had never finished with less than 56 wins. Bird did not want Fitch to go. So immediately, Jones is behind the 8 ball. The Celtics star player really doesn't want him there. Nothing against Casey Jones, he just doesn't want Bill Fitch to leave. Well, it didn't take Jones long to make Bird and all Celtics fans forget about Bill Fitch. Because in 1984, the Celtics won the NBA championship. The year after that, they went back to the NBA Finals, but they lost to the Celtics in 6 games. The year after that, they won the NBA Finals, beating the Rockets in 6 games. Year after that, another NBA Finals appearance, they lost in 6 games to the Lakers. So in Casey Jones's first 4 years as Boston Celtics head coach, they were in the NBA Finals. The Celtics took a step back in 87-88. They lost in the Eastern Conference Finals to the Bad Boy Pistons in 6 games. Casey Jones stunned everyone by retiring. He came back to coach the Seattle Supersonics, but that really wasn't a great idea. He wasn't as good with the Supersonics, but don't let that take anything away from what Jones did. The guy won 12 NBA titles, 8 as a player, 2 as a head coach, and 2 as an assistant coach. He is a basketball Hall of Famer, a college basketball Hall of Famer, a U.S. Olympic Hall of Famer. His number 25 is rightfully retired by the Celtics. He's one of the most underrated men in basketball history. Alright, now on to Phil Niekro. Niekro's death marks a pretty dubious distinction for 2020, as if it needed another distinction. 7 Baseball Hall of Famers have died this year. Niekro, Lou Brock, Whitey Ford, Bob Gibson, Tom Seaver, Al Kaline, and Joe Morgan. More Baseball Hall of Famers have died this year than in any other calendar year. Here's hoping this is the last one, man, let me tell you. Phil Niekro is, without question, the best knuckleballer in baseball history. It was because of that knuckleball that he lasted so long in the majors. He pitched 24 seasons in the bigs. He has 318 wins, 3,342 strikeouts. What's so incredible about that is that his MLB career really didn't get going until 1967, when he was 28 years old. He had spent some time with the Braves before that, but he was used primarily as a reliever. In 67, the Braves really needed starters. Niekro started out the year in the bullpen, but was forced into the starting rotation and would never look back. He went 11-9 with a 1.87 ERA. That 1.87 ERA led the majors. If I don't jump around in Niekro's career, we're going to be here until New Year's. So I'll move to 1969, his first All-Star season, where he really cemented himself as one of the best pitchers in baseball. He went 23-13 with a 2.56 ERA. He did pitch in the playoffs against the Mets in the NLCS, but he really wasn't that good. It's kind of interesting. For as long as Niekro pitched, he only pitched in 2 playoff games. I'll get into his second one a little bit later. In 1974, Niekro led the National League in wins, complete games, and innings pitched. He had 20 wins, 18 complete games, and 302 and a third innings pitched. That really started the dominant stretch of Niekro's career. Mind you, in 74, he was 35 years old. In 75, he made his second All-Star team. In 77, 78, and 79, he led the majors in innings pitched. In all 3 of those years, he pitched more than 330 innings. He also led the majors in games started, and he led the National League in complete games those 3 years. He was one of those old school pitchers. Give him the ball and get out of his way. In 78, he made his third All-Star team. In 79, his age 40 season, he went 21-20. He led the National League in wins, and he led the majors in losses. In 1982, Niekro made his 4th All-Star game. He went 17-4. That .810 winning percentage led the majors. That year, Niekro got to pitch in his second and final postseason game, and he pitched well, 6 innings of 2-run ball against the St. Louis Cardinals, but the Braves would lose that game 4-3, and they'd get swept in the NLCS in 3 games. After the 1983 season, Niekro was released by the Braves. At this point, he's 44 years old. Everyone's thinking he's going to retire. He didn't. He went to the Yankees on a 2-year contract. He immediately proved that releasing him was a mistake. In '84, he was the Yankees' best pitcher. He went 16-8 with a 3.09 ERA and made his last All-Star game. The year after that, Ron Guidry reclaimed his quote-unquote ace status, but Niekro still went 16-12 with a 4.09 ERA. His last start with the Yankees was October 6th, 1985. It was against the Blue Jays. It was the last game of the Yankees season. Niekro entered that game with 299 wins. Mind you, he's 46 years old. Niekro pitched a complete game shutout. The Yankees won 8-0. I did not know this. He didn't throw his knuckleball until the final hitter, Jeff Burroughs. Thank you, Wikipedia, for that. For a long time, Niekro was the oldest pitcher to pitch a shutout in Major League history. But Jamie Moyer, at the age of 47, pitched a complete game shutout in May of 2010. Hitters hated to hit against him. Pete Rose had a tough time against Niekro. His knuckleball was vicious. Tim Wakefield, eat your heart out. R.A. Dickey, eat your heart out. You have nothing on Niekro. He was elected to the Baseball Hall of Fame in 1997 on the 5th ballot. I don't know what took the writers so long. He should have been a first ballot Hall of Famer. It's absolutely terrible that these guys passed away, one right after the other. Jones at the age of 88, Niekro at the age of 81. May they rest in peace. Until tomorrow, I am Jacob Valk saying that you can have money stacked to the ceiling, but the size of your funeral is still going to depend upon the weather.